And we're recording.
Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe, and here with me is the magnificent, or is it immaculate,
Still
Jasper?
immaculate.
That's good. Uh, Today we're continuing our, I guess, Fire and Blood or House of the Dragon
Discussion.
series. Yeah. This time I get the black, which is to say Rhaenyra.
And if
So,
you're interested in more content like this, check out my channel and you should be able to find us talking about Alicent. And we'll have many more coming out soon.
yep. So, anyways, now Rhaenyra is an interesting character. She starts off rather more helpless than most characters who first show up in this era, because the thing about Viserys and Daemon is that they at least had the protection of, yes, an ailing Jaehaerys, but they still had the king's protection. And credit to him, at least Corlys was not willing to go after Viserys and Daemon when they were kids.
Mm-hmm.
He did have some decency in that regard. The trouble with Rhaenyra is that she comes when her dad becomes king, she doesn't really have the sort of protection to an extent that her dad had. And the reason I'm arguing that is when the minute she was basically thrust into being first in line after Viserys, this put her she basically became a target.
Mm-hmm.
As you have Daemon, who clearly wants the throne. Now, Daemon, for his part, we do have to give him some credit. I don't think he's willing to step over the corpse of Rhaenyra initially, to an extent, out of respect, at least for his brother. He was willing to step over a nephew's corpse, but it doesn't seem like he initially took his niece's claim too seriously at first. But when Viserys got serious about that, it seems like Daemon kind of realized, okay, I have to back off here. But in turn, he started to groom Rhaenyra to an extent.
Yeah.
In turn, now I'm going to rely on the book from Fire and Blood, which is to say, the trouble is here we have a bit of a war between various sources, because you have Mushroom saying one thing, Eustace saying another thing, and you have Gildane, who's gathering the sources and saying has his own angle, very evidently, when you read the book. And he's busy saying, well, Rhaenyra was a wanton person. But here's the problem. She was like 9 or 10 when Alicent marries her dad, and when, Criston Cole becomes her sworn shield. How could she have any relations? So we kind of have to run with the mentality that clearly someone is spreading rumors at court about her and is attacking her reputation and attacking her status as Princess of Dragonstone. And the only person who that can be is Alicent alongside Otto. Now, I know in the TV show, real quick, Alicent is not the wicked stepmother. But in the book, she clearly is, because she's about a decade older than Rhaenyra, thereabouts. She's quite a few years older.
Yeah.
And Rhaenyra, I know later on she's got her own colorful, she makes her own colorful decisions. But early on, we have to kind of look at her as a bit of she's vulnerable. Like, clearly she's not engaging in a rivalry initially, because she's just a young girl. And Viserys obviously gives some protection, but the problem is he marries this woman who clearly wants his daughter set aside in the succession. And so from an early age, Rhaenyra has to learn to kind of armor herself emotionally, because her stepmother is out to get her. So right there, this is not a good recipe for a healthy individual. And if I have to make a comparison, okay, actually, I might compare Rhaenyra in some ways to Visenya to an extent. She becomes quite fierce later on. And initially, I'm going to be honest. I don't think initially there was an affair between Criston Cole and Rhaenyra in the book
Hmm.
because she's a child. Clearly, she kind of, she maybe fancied him like little girls might fancy the good-looking knight in shining armor, but in no way was there a relationship. As for the possible relationship between her and Daemon, there's no way that happened because she was a child. And much as we said, now I'm just going to explain my case. Much as we said that Daemon may have been grooming her, I think it was more emotional grooming and courting. He wasn't physically going after her because, you know, that would be dangerous. So my only now I'm just saying that as early Rhaenyra. Later, I think there was a relationship between her and Criston Cole, and there was a bit of bitterness on his end in the breakup, at least because he basically aligns with the Greens quite firmly.
Yes, and I'm just kind of like juggling the times a bit with my head, and I'm like just trying to think like, was she that young back then? Because I definitely remember there were moments in the books where it mentioned how Daemon was kind of putting the moves on her before Alicent and Viserys were married, if I recall correctly. And
Yeah,
yes, she is that young.
yeah. I don't think Daemon did touch her early on, and
So
oh,
much for
go.
this getting monetized.
Sorry.
Uh,
Um,
no, I mean, no, don't worry about it. But with that squared away, I would partially disagree with you. I think we're giving Damon, like, I don't know, maybe it's just because of George's writing in general, but I think we're giving Damon too much credit given the period and just how the world in A Song of Ice and Fire is. Because we have to remember, in Westeros, child brides and whatnot were more common than our own
yeah,
history.
yeah, that's true. Very true. The only thing I was going to mention was that Damon was running around with his one mistress.
Yeah, because she was just 7 years old, like when Criston Cole was introduced. Good God, damn it, George. That I'll talk a lot about a trash of like the show and adaptations, but the one thing I will always praise them is aging up the characters.
Yeah, I'm not going to contend with that. I do agree. I think I'm just kind of looking at it as I don't think Damon did. Now, my theory is that he didn't, but accusing him of doing it was really good political ammo for Allison and Otto because it's very it's the best kind of slander against Damon and even Rhaenyra. It this is a this is political dynamite to hit them with and bludgeon them over the skull with.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, Rhaenyra did not wed till she was 17. Now, I'm actually going to suggest something. I think her first relationship was probably with Cole, but now I do understand there's the child bride thing. But the problem is Damon was in and out of the city when she was young, and he was, he was pretty dedicated to his one concubine. And later, when she was gone and he was single and in the city, I'm not sure he had put the moves on Rhaenyra just yet. I think he was more laying groundwork like Palpatine, and at least that's my theory.
I mean, I don't think there's enough to say outright that you are like. I'd have to go through the book again. I don't know if there's enough to say that outright you are wrong. I will say that at least for me, this is like arguing like, all right, who was worse, Pol Pot or Stalin? At the end of the
Fair.
day, they're both
It,
terrible.
yeah, that's fair. Very true. That being said, the funny thing is that there's a great rejoinder in the book that Rhaenyra comes up with when Criston Cole says, "All right, let's run away and elope to Essos." You have her. Okay, but if you are willing to forsake your oaths as a member of the Kingsguard, how do I know you're going to honor marriage vows.
Yeah,
And
I'm definitely in agreement with you on this. I think when I was reading the books, that just made the most sense to me, because
yeah,
because I couldn't think of a real other obvious reason why Criston Cole would have such a deep seated hatred for Rhaenyra. Because listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't have a lot of experience of turning down women who are fawning over me. It's a rarity in my book. However,
so,
I will say, on the one or two occasions it's happened, I never felt a great animosity to the people I turned down. So in my
no,
head, it always made more sense that Criston Cole was somewhat pursuing Rhaenyra, but I also never believed the her turning her down. I think it was like something. I think the show actually probably did the most reasonable and articulate way of how a lot of the events in the books played out.
yes, especially when it comes to this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But my theory is also that Jacaerys is probably Criston Cole's son.
That I've read about that, and that would be really cool. That would
Yeah,
be. I'm trying to think. Jacaerys, does Criston Cole have brown hair or black hair?
I think
Because
he
Kristen,
is.
because it's a little bit of an interesting thing. In the show, I don't think so. In the book, it's a possibility. The reason why, like, it's less so in the book, in the show, is because they do change Criston Cole's race a little bit. They make him Dornish, or at least part Dornish, which, given his location in, I believe it is accurate that it's the Dornish Marches that he lives in, which is right next to Dorne. So, a little bit of back and forth with that makes perfect sense. And even if it's in the Stormlands, it's called the Dornish Marches. But his
It
appear,
could still work. No.
yeah, I mean it's a possibility, yeah. But I mean, it being Criston Cole's makes a lot more sense than it being Laenor's kids. But
Yeah, that said,
yeah, he had.
um,
So I guess my only argument with that would be Criston Cole has black hair rather than brown, and in the books and show, obviously the actors have brown hair. So Though then again, I don't know hair genetics that well. For all we know, white plus black equals brown.
whatever. It doesn't matter, like you said. And that said, Rhaenyra doesn't seem to give Cole much thought after the breakup. She both in show and book, she's like, whatever. Whereas it's all Cole thinks about. He's obsessed.
Yeah, I definitely think like his hate, like his anger towards her, and this is going more into the show rather than the book because the book is a lot up in the air. But I really like that he didn't seem hurt or angry that she turned him down, more so that she slept with him like that, and that soiled his white cloak. And now he was trying to gain back what little honor he. It's very akin to like how Robb Stark handled the issue with the phrase, or not the issue with the phrase, but how Rob's
Western.
yeah, the Westerlings. Robb Stark, slept with Charlie Chaplin's granddaughter, um, and or in the books, not Charlie Chaplin. Sorry, that was the show, but similar situation. And to hold on to what honor he had, he married her, so he would not dishonor her. This is kind of like a bit of the opposite. It was Rhaenyra who kind of pressured in the kind of or at least there was a high possibility, given the difference in status between the two, pressuring Criston Cole into this whole kind of situation. Not to say that she like twisted it, not to say like it was like forced or anything along those lines, but slight power imbalance and wanting to try and keep what honor he has and like get out of here, start a family or something, because he knows that he can't do any of that in Westeros. It's more so upset that now what honor he can't claim any honor to a certain point. It's just all
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah. In the book, he has no honor. And but the thing here is, yeah, in the show, she basically used him and threw him away. That said, this does show a certain aspect of Rhaenyra's character in the show. She's ruthless,
Mm-hmm.
but looking at her backstory, she kind of has to be in order to claim the crown.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not saying I'm not trying to justify everything she does, but she does need to be a little ruthless because Otto and Alicent in the show are out to get her. And this is where she has to defend herself and protect herself.
Mm-hmm.
The trouble is, um, she's trapped between her desire to make her dad proud and her own hunger for the throne to an extent. But she's like, even if she had wanted to escape, likely her father would have Criston hunted down and Rhaenyra dragged back. She couldn't really escape. And all it would do is disgrace her. And this she would not do. And that said, when it comes to uh, her other kids, the trouble with Rhaenyra is that she, okay, I'll actually say, she has a claim. Now, there's just to balance things out. Aegon, by traditional Westerosi law or Andal law, has a better claim than Rhaenyra. You know, eldest son comes before
Eldest daughter.
Yeah, that's primogeniture. That is law. But the weird Valyrian absolute monarchy, while we appoint our successor thing of the Targaryens, which is always ignored, says whoever Viserys votes for, and then you can ignore. But I'm joking there. But actually, Viserys' appointed successor is Rhaenyra. And okay, so the throne in that regard should go to Rhaenyra. But the problem with Rhaenyra is that she compounds her problems in a way, because it's, even in the book, I got a sense, you get a good sense that it's very possible that at least Lucerys and Joffrey are not Laenor's kids. And the trouble here is that none of her children are her husband's children, her first husband's children. And this is just, there is a certain amount of, how do I put it?
Responsibility?
Yeah, there's a lot of dignity and responsibility because, you know, like, her dad is trying to maintain the dignity of the crown, and Rhaenyra doesn't care.
Yeah, that's the thing. You mentioned how like she's kind of balanced, you know, wanting the throne and making her father proud. I definitely never got that. There was never a moment where I feel like she really wanted, at least especially in the books and maybe a little bit in the show, but I don't think she was ever really trying to make her dad proud. I think she had her own way of going about things, as well as just a general like giving in to moderate like these vices of hers, or at least vices for the times and period.
You're right in her being more than happy to give into her vices. All I was going to say was that in the show, she clearly wants to make her dad a little proud of her. In the book, you don't get a sense of that. She's just whimsical, like flighty.
Yeah, and you have to like somewhat pity her because I mean, you know, obviously in the show she's a bit older, but you know, in the book she's a lot younger when some of this stuff happens. So it's like, oh, you stupid teenager.
Yeah, and oh man, like you look at just how, now that said, when she ends up mothering most of these kids, she's a grown woman. So we could say, oh, come on, like a little respect for your dad's wishes to an extent.
Yeah.
And clearly there's very little respect for the dignity of the crown, or even the Velaryons. The Velaryons have been wanting a crown for a while, and they've been playing ball really well for years, despite the fact that Rhaenys did have a claim, a pretty strong claim. But they played ball every step of the way, and Rhaenyra just basically spits in their faces and says, "Yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
I don't care."
Yeah, that's an issue I have with the House Velaryon in general, and how they've been handled in the show. But we can save that for when we tackle Corlys specifically, or House Velaryon in general, if he's not quite enough to fill out a whole episode. But with that, I will say, I like when I was chatting with my friend DJ Fella as the episodes were coming out, when we hear Rhaenyra like justify her, like we tried. First thing he said, "You didn't try hard enough." Like, come on, bring in your husband's boyfriend, get him started, and then bada bing, bada boom. You got to put more effort into it. You're the queen.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, historically, if you looked at fairly homosexual monarchs, such as James VI of Scotland, and he was also James I of England, he was homosexual, but he managed to father what, 4 or 5 kids, I think. He was,
Ooh.
and he was a doting father apparently. So he was he was able to do his duty.
You know,
Like,
so this is getting a little bit off topic, but do we like know about that? Because I do know that there's like a lot of monarchs who like didn't show much interest in like women in general, and everyone like Richard the Lionheart.
well,
Everyone swears Richard the Lionheart was gay.
well, yeah, Richard was. We don't know. He may have just been asexual, but the thing is, we know for a fact James was because he had a very public affair with, I think, the Duke of Buckingham.
Oh, that's cool.
But Buckingham assumed a role almost of a family counselor as well, and almost like a kind of older brother slash uncle to
I was gonna say
James.
he's counseling something.
Yeah, he was clearly having an affair. The two were homosexual and a loving couple, and essentially, Buckingham helped the king and queen with their kids.
Ah, interesting.
So,
Anyways,
yeah,
enough about history. Back to Game of Thrones. But yeah, anyways, put more effort into it. And a lot of people say, like, what if Laenor was sterile or something along those lines? Okay,
it's
in that case, find some, like, get Corlys in your bed or somebody who has the Valyrian genetics. There's tons of them. You got options. And do it that way. Don't make it so obvious your children are bastards. At least make sure the first one's kinda looking legit.
but none of them do, and that is just ah. You know what I mean? It's like, Rhaenyra, what are you doing? But the thing is, she can be very clever and sly, and these are strong points in her favor. But the problem is, she does have these massive vices, and she keeps catering to them. And one second.
Oh, while I have your attention, sorta kinda, I think you want to put Discord on to Do Not Disturb. Every once in a while, I hear your notifications, and I'm.
I don't know how to do that.
Oh, do you see, like, in the bottom left, kind of near the screen, where you see your icon? If you talk, you should see, like, the green circle coming around it.
All right. Let me see. Online, do not disturb. So that I'll silence it.
Yeah, that should silence it.
Okay, that's been annoying me. I didn't know about that. Sorry.
No problem, but I just know that the people who are going to watch, because this is your video, not mine, they're going to be checking their Discord every single time they hear that, because I do the exact same thing.
I'll have to edit that out. But
Oh,
yeah, sorry
good luck.
about that.
No problem, no problem. But
I'll have to go it by section and
yeah.
listen to every second. But anyways,
But with that squared away, something that I'm kind of realizing is, aside from the age, I don't know if there's like a massive difference between book and show Rhaenyra.
there isn't, I think. And the trouble is now when when it comes time for her to marry Daemon, she's um how do I put it? She handles, like, at least she's faithful to Daemon, but the trouble is Rhaenyra got in bed with a viper, I think, but the trouble is she's just as much of a viper and panther as him, and it now in the show she views as, well, we're protecting my dad's throne in a way. That seems to be some of her justification, but the trouble is that, well, she's not doing much to uh, she's not doing much to soothe the fire, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. That's,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's something that's kind of bugged me. And this isn't Rhaenyra's fault per se, but it's kind of the same how I felt about Dany in the books and show. Like, I don't hate these two characters at all. I find them interesting, like, not the most interesting of a lot of characters, but I am curious about them. However, I always feel like it just bugs me how much so many people love them. Like when I was watching Game of Thrones, everyone was singing the praise of how amazing of a queen Dany was. I'm just like, nah, she's kind of shit in the books and the show. Kind of shit. Keeps making the wrong decisions.
And she keeps saying she wants to ride to Westeros in fire and blood.
Mm-hmm.
She's
And
advocating. Oh, I'm gonna go on a whole frenzy here. Doesn't shouldn't we take her at her word?
but with Rhaenyra, it's the same thing for me. I am very interested in her character and whatnot. I have to say though, I don't think she would be a really good queen.
No, I think she's a terrible monarch.
I think
I
even
her brother is terrible.
I'll be completely honest. I think even if like the Greens were like, oh yeah, sure, she can be queen, no issues on that. I feel like after she died or passed away, there was going to be another Dance of Dragons between her bastard children and her children from Daemon.
Yep, same.
Like, like even if everything went perfectly for her, she was just going to be the next Viserys.
Yeah, well, except Viserys at least was a decent monarch and cared. I
And
got a sense that she might grind her subjects down, for one thing. She honestly didn't care about them. And I got the sense that her, like, let's say Jace became king. Well, the trouble is he's illegitimate. The trouble with his brothers, they're illegitimate. And it might sound weird, but the way I see it, for one thing, Daemon would not want, people would disagree with me, but Daemon would not want his children passed over for illegitimate children.
mm-hmm.
He would probably try to do away with Jace, Luke, and
Joffrey.
Joffrey. He would try to step over them so that his son, Aegon, could be king. And this would lead to a dance. And either that or he would quietly have the three disposed of. So that, oh, wow, look, Aegon suddenly is the heir. He's the only one who could claim the throne. On the other hand, much as I don't like Alicent and Otto, let's be honest, Rhaenyra was definitely going to do away with that part of the family. They have too good a claim.
Yeah, in the show, like that's probably a big difference. In the show, there definitely does seem to be an air of no, you guys can get along, you know? You guys were friends for so long. You don't just murder your best friend. There is an air of peace can be achieved between the two. In the books, nah.
No.
That's the thing. In the books, Alicent's like and Otto's choices and actions kind of make more sense, but they're still less sympathetic in the books.
Yeah. That said, uh, when it comes time for Luke to perish, this causes Rhaenyra to crumble. She, like initially, she's very shocked and horrified. Naturally so, because, like she lost her son. And no parent, no matter what, should ever bury their child. And I know we're saying like she was going to cause another war or something. But on the other hand, she is a mother. Like,
oh yeah,
I don't think a parent should bury their child.
Yeah, of course, nobody
Except
wants
Alice.
that. Which child? Aegon, right?
Well, I think Alicent deserved to bury all of them. But I don't think that Helena and Darren deserve to perish.
Okay, I was going to say, come on, even Helena. But
no, Helena, she's good.
But on the topic of the death of Rhaenyra's son, Luce, I know they call him Luke, but I think the full name is Lucerys. That is an interesting change that they made from the books, and I think it's one I prefer because it's not that one's better than the other, but in the books, in the books when Lucerys dies, she kind of breaks down and she starts to like really consider peace to make sure that this doesn't happen to her other children. Whereas, obviously, in the show, they switch it up to where that's going to be the moment where she hardens and nah, all you motherfuckers gonna die now.
Yeah, all of you must die. But
Oh, bleep,
the
sorry.
I'll have to delete that. But yeah, this is when her resolve hardens. But what I prefer about the book is that Aemond totally meant to do it. He's he's a much cooler well, he's more psychotic than Ramsay or Joffrey, and he's got a dragon mind. Like, I just thought he was a great villain. But in the show, I didn't like how they did it at all. No, make him do it. Make him want it. Like, because this is the moment when, like, there's no going back.
So,
But
and this comes into like the whole situation of, adaptations and how accurate to the source material should they be. I mean, I'm definitely of the mind 9 times out of 10 be as accurate as possible. With that said, there are plenty of situations where I can look at even just Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon where I go like, hey, that is kind of better than the original. Case in point, Paddy Constantine's Viserys is just leaps and bounds better than the book.
all right, so now let's decide which one we prefer of the two Rhaenyras.
So, I am very indifferent about both of them.
I have a hard time telling them apart. I'm being honest, they just seem so similar.
Yeah, and I'm trying to draw a blank. I think a lot of the differences between the two are going to come up later, because you and I both know that Rhaenyra does some questionable like, she's always done questionable shit, but like, she's going to do some real questionable shit coming up, and I'm curious if the showrunners are actually going to go through with it.
I hope they do.
Me too, because that's the thing. Like, and going back to like when Aemond killed Lucerys, I think I'm more of on the lines of thinking that was a good change, as well as just kind of painting that the dragons are powerful beasts, and while the Targaryens have some control over them, it's not as much as we all think it is. These are still powerful monsters that act on instincts like animals.
I guess I still prefer the idea of Aemond being so psycho that everybody completely underestimated him.
Yeah, I think that's just a difference of preference between you and I. Like, for example, I did not care for Joffrey or Ramsay. They were enjoyable.
I did not enjoy them, actually, funny enough. I didn't enjoy them. I just found them annoying and dumb. And I also found them they're evil, too vulgar for my taste.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you could say. I know that's a weird sentiment.
But it sounds like to me, though, that you wish Aemond was more like them, more violent, like kind of how he's portrayed a bit more in the book.
Yeah, I want him violent. And I guess I just kind of look at him like some of the classic literary villains to an extent, like Agamemnon or even what's her name? Well, Sigmunder's brother-in-law. Mm-hmm. The thing is, I want him violent like that, and I want him to get his comeuppance. Okay. And that's what I want. And I like the idea that at least one of Alicent's children turn out that violent, because he's the real force behind the Greens.
Yeah.
Events.
And when you think about it, it's just kind of a switch of Aegon and Aemond. In the books, it's a bit more, Aegon is a bit more of the sympathetic character, where Aemond is more vile. In the show, it's the opposite. Aemond's a bit more sympathetic, and Aegon's just vile.
Yeah, I don't like that change.
Yeah, neither do I. If you were to tell me, like, which character, if I could only have one sympathetic and one vile character, I'd definitely switch it up. But anyways, we're forgetting, this is about Rhaenyra, not Aemond and Aegon.
So I think we should end it here, because, just real quick, because, like, we've exhausted Rhaenyra. And at least for this...
There is one more thing I kind of want to talk about in comparison to the books and show a bit, and that is Laenor's death. And we don't have to talk specifically about Laenor or the Velaryons, but Rhaenyra, you stupid broad. Her justification for this is terrible.
Now, in the book, she did not have anything to do with Leonor's passing.
As far as we are aware, because there's like two possible outcomes. The first is Laenor just happened to be killed by his jealous lover or something along those lines. The other is that Daemon orchestrated the death so that way
Oh yeah,
he could get with her. I
yeah. I fall in with Daemon orchestrating it.
Oh yeah, I mean that just given what we kind of know, especially show Damon, makes total sense. I I'm honestly don't know how Rhaenyra convinced him to not kill Laenor after all this. Like okay, like he'll be like, "Oh, okay, don't worry. I'll definitely help him get away." And then as those two are like sailing that boat, there's a hole in it and they just drown or something. Like, "Oh god. This I hate that in a Daemon sense, and I even hate it more so in a Rhaenyra sense because her motivation is terrible. Because
Yeah,
she says, the Velaryons are of the water, we are of the fire, we don't mix. We will be stronger if you and I are together, which, no, no, you won't, because the simple fact of the matter is Daemon is already kind of on Team Black. So you don't gain any extra strength or support by wedding him. You do, however, greatly risk losing the support of Corlys and House Velaryon, who have a lot of money, a lot of ships, and a couple dragons. So she must
now
have been drinking intensely to think that
I'm
this was a good political move.
I'm gonna say one thing. I think in the book, my opinion is I don't know if she's aware Damon had her husband done away with initially. I think she caught on later, and I'm of the opinion that the thing is she probably felt that she gains a lot by marrying Damon, more in the sense of he's fierce, he's strong, and like she's basically marrying the equivalent of Oberyn Martell. Like that
With a
is a
dragon.
yeah. So the thing is, I got the sense that at least in the book, it's also a personal desire on her part.
Oh
He's
yeah,
been
like I said,
courting.
book book's fine. Books I'm fine with the book, It's because of that lack of information. It's the show that I am having a problem with in this case.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough.
Because it makes no sense.
I agree.
It's like
Yeah,
they try to frame it as her motivation is because of political reasons. Nah, she just wants to get on the Damon D.
yeah. That's because he's been just in her head for decades, or at least a decade or something. Like he's been in her head for a long time.
Yeah, honestly, had they played it more into like a lustful desire or something along those lines, I'd be more accepting of it. Still think Laenor should be dead, but at least
I'd
like
be
her decisions and choices kind of okay.
On the other hand, from a political perspective, I'm just going to be honest, because of how uh, weirdo the Targs are with their incest. Ew. I always have to add the ew. The trouble is that it does kind of strengthen her claim because she does kind of need a. The thing is, the Targs always feels like their legitimacy is strengthened when they marry another Targ,
Mm-hmm.
and so her choices are essentially Aegon, Aemond, Darren, and Daemon. And so she chooses obviously one who will back her up and whatnot.
But here's
And
but here's the
the
issue with that.
is it risks alienating the Velaryons, but it does in the end it doesn't because
We
the
we
Velaryons are
God, we can
yeah.
get into that when we talk about the Valarians. Good God, that motivation. Yeah. Anyways,
I I think we've talked this into the ground.
you are right. You are right. But maybe the final thing to try and stretch this out a little bit longer is we probably should talk a bit about Rhaenyra's relationship with Alicent, as that is the biggest discrepancy between the books and the show.
In the show, they start off besties. In the book, clearly Alicent had it in for her,
Yeah.
or had it out for her. She did not like her stepdaughter. She wanted her set aside. She she spread scandalous rumors about uh, the child ever since she was a little girl. This is basically the wicked stepmother.
Mhm.
And Viserys did kind of in the book try to protect his daughter to an extent. And to an extent. In the show, the relationship is vastly different and it becomes much more embittered to an extent. Well, it is very embittered in the book, but in a different way.
And I,
Um,
and I feel like because this is mostly a change to Alicent rather than Rhaenyra, we can probably go into more detail with her video. But I will say, for the most part, I do think this is a change that I am in favor of. I
I,
think it's a bit more of an interesting conflict between the two, that they were once great friends rather than bitchy, pain, annoying stepmom.
well, I'm gonna be honest. Weirdly, I'm not in favor of it.
Really?
I find it weirdly less tragic in a way because in the book, I got the sense of Rhaenyra being a bit of the tragedy in that um, she might have wanted a relationship with her stepmother, but her stepmother, yeah, that was never to be, and Rhaenyra was screwed from the minute Viserys wed Alicent, and that the focus in that regard is on Rhaenyra to an extent. Whereas with the show, it shifts over to Alicent, and the tragedy is not about Rhaenyra in a way, but Alicent. And I guess I don't really like that as much because I'm also in favor of the Maester conspiracy tinfoil hat theory. I really like that idea. I think it makes it more interesting that the Maesters and the Hightowers are out to get the Targs, and that Alicent's been involved in that kind of conspiracy against at least Viserys and Rhaenyra, and that Rhaenyra may not have been aware of it, but on the other hand, she did know that her stepmother hated her and that her stepmother's father hated her ever since she was a little girl. So she's the I guess I kind of view it as, yeah, she became a monster later, but it's a case where why did she become a monster? Well, you had Daemon grooming her to an extent. You had the High Towers out together, and so I think that's a much more complex story than the one we get in the show. And my problem with the way with like, oh, they were originally best friends, but they turned on each other. Yeah, okay, I already saw this story. It's called Star Wars Episode 1, 2, and 3. I already saw it. It was funner back then. Can we see a different story? And I know that's going to be an oversimplification, but I've even seen this kind of story to an extent in Dragonlance a few times. So it's like, I've seen this before. I preferred it the first few times. Can we get it? Can we get what was in the book, which was a little original?
I don't know if we can really call what's. So I think this may be the greatest disagreement we've had so far. Because, I mean, Evil Stepmother is not exactly the most interesting thing. It's been around since Cinderella.
No, I just mean when it comes to originality. Sorry for interrupting, Jasper. I think my what I mean by it being original is that now the wicked stepmother trying to ruin her stepchildren. That's not original. Like you said, there's Cinderella, there's Snow White, there's all that. Where it's original, I think, is that the child turns into a monster later in life. Typically, in the fairy stories and in older stories, the child turns out great somehow. And yet, here we see the possible what could happen with such a toxic environment. That's where I found it was a little original.
Okay, and I can see kind of the interesting aspect to that. With that said, I think that the former friendship is what makes it more tragic rather than the original. Because right
Well,
when Viserys weds Alicent, there's really only one way this is going, especially because he seems dead set on not wedding Rhaenyra to Aegon. Whereas with the show and that former friendship and bond they have, I mean, it's so interesting to actually see Alicent do what she can to help and support Rhaenyra during this these times, but Rhaenyra, being the knucklehead that she is, keeps dropping the ball every time it's in her court. And even until the very end, after Viserys gives his final speech, there's a chance of peace. You feel like there is. There's just something. There's some middle ground you guys could probably come up with. But in the end, we all know where this is going to go. And that's what's so tragic. It is a preventable disaster.
Yeah, that's true. On the other hand, I think that at that speech, it's Rhaenyra who tries to offer the velvet glove. It doesn't work out, though. The trouble... Now, I'll just say real quick, I think there was a way to put in a middle ground between us here. Like, you could have had the wicked stepmother, but, just hear me out. They could have put it in that, or wrote it in that in the first 2 episodes, Alicent is stepmom, but she is fond of Rhaenyra. And that it's as the story is progressing, she becomes increasingly a wicked stepmother. Where we see initially she dotes on Rhaenyra and loves her, but then, and the two are very close. But then, as things progress, she becomes less and less. She goes from being the show Alicent to an extent early on and becomes the book Alicent. They could have had this gradual change so that,
So
that we see.
that is completely different, though, in regards to I am saying that I prefer how the show did it compared to the book, whereas you saying the best way is something in between.
Yeah.
We don't, sadly, we don't got that in between option. It sounds very interesting. It's a bit more accurate to the book, and it succeeds in making Alicent probably a bit more relatable and sympathetic as well. But if it's purely just the books or just the show, no fan fiction hoity-toity changing, I think the show holds together and is more emotionally invested in that regard.
Just because of Patty, because he does such a great job with the acting. I'm joking. Yeah, I'm not sure which one I prefer with Rhaenyra. Just with her, not looking at Alicent. I think that I can't see the difference between the two characters. Show and book just seem like the same person to me. I don't see the difference.
Yeah, and to be clear, like, that's really a good thing. That's the sign of a great adaptation.
Fair enough.
Compared to everyone else where we had to go into a lot more detail about the differences between them.
Yeah, this one, it's hard to find the differences.
Yeah. But with that, I successfully stretched this out. Is there any other things that you might want to go over real fast?
No, I can't think of any. Let me see. Oh, there is one difference, I think. Aegon and Viserys, the children of Daemon and Rhaenyra, were supposed to be a little older, I think.
The children of Daemon and Rhaenyra were older in the book?
I think so. Just a few years older.
That's so weird when they're older in the books than the show. That never happens.
Yeah, I know, right? I think that's the case. And I really, really hope that we get age-appropriate Aegon and Viserys, because they're fairly tragic figures.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking. Like, I'm actually curious, like, how far we're going to go after the Dance of Dragons with some of the survivors and whatnot. I'm assuming, like, without going into spoilers, I'm assuming, like, House of the Dragons is going to end at the final coronation once the winner is, decided.
I hope they keep going.
I mean, I would love to. Personally, with House of the Dragon, I feel like they should have started with Aegon's conquest and just gone through the entire dynasty of Targaryens, from Aegon's conquest all the way to Robert's Rebellion. Or even include Robert's Rebellion.
Same.
Yeah. But, hey, they wanted the most spectacular and damaging war, but hopefully eventually we'll be able to get all these aspects.
Yeah. And the changes they did bring about were not overwhelmingly huge, from what I can see.
All right. Well, with that, I think that's everything. Do you want to sign us out?
Sure. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button. and to also go over to Jasper's channel and make sure to subscribe over there. He'll be hosting the Alicent video. So until next time, stay awesome, I guess.